So this video is intended to help you more easily review charts in Meditech. So here we click into a patient's chart. The first visit up top here you can see is the current visit. These are previous visits that you can see. The ones with the magnifying glass are ones that show admissions, and ambulance means that they were ER visits. So when you first click into the patient's chart for this chart, you see that it goes to the vital signs correctly. We will go through this tab a little bit later, but right now I'm going to give you some tips about how to actually review the chart. So up at the top here, you can click on Record List, which will bring you back to the screen that shows all of the patients. To protect privacy, I'm not going to do that here. For this patient, you can look at other visits, and what you'll see are the other visits, like I said before. Up at the top of the screen here, you have the option to view all, and when you click this button, now everything over on the right-hand column will be reflective of all of his past visits. For example, when you click in the Other Reports segment, you can see all of the previous documents for the previous admissions and previous ED visits. What's important there is that you can click into the admission notes, you can click into the other ED visits, and you can see what this past history looks like. If you only want to select a couple of past visits, for example, when a child's been here a million times, you click back on the other visits, and on the right there are boxes here, and you can select. And when the X is there, you can see that those will be the visits that you'll see. And you can click up here on the View Selected. You'll have the information again based on those visits. This will show you historical vital signs, and you can scroll to look earlier. So just pay attention to the date and time of when it was, because remember, it's not just the current visit. If you're in the View All or View Selected tab, it'll also show you past imaging, so you can see this is in July, this one is in November, past labs, again, pay attention to the date, past serologies, past urine, past chemistries. And the nice thing about looking at it this way is that if you have a bunch of different labs, you can also click on each independent value here and see them listed in the chart. So if you have a diuretic, you can see all of the sugars by clicking on the glucose, and they'll be listed. That's the case with this patient. So for this child now, when you've selected View All, you can see the laboratory values for over time, and other visits where he's gotten CBCs, other chemistries, urine, and then serologies with the positive values loading, as they typically do. And you can see past history of all of the imaging that's been done for comparison. The Other Reports section I mentioned is helpful. You click on the thought bubbles to pull up those records. Also, previous discharge instructions and whatnot can be pulled up by looking at the cameras. It's important to note that EKGs are found in this Other Reports tab. One thing to mention about the Other Visits section here is that it only shows visits that are associated with a patient if the name is spelled correctly. For example, if there's only one last name out of the two Hispanic last names, it might not be linked to that chart. So if the family has said that they were here before, you might need to search in a different manner. For example, in the Search Any Record tab. So now we're going to talk more about how to do chart review within the patient's current hospitalization. So this patient has been here for a few days. I'd like to kind of go tab by tab. So we talked about the record days, talked about other visits, special panels we don't typically use, 24 hours, just gives you sort of an overall view of the vital signs. And you can change the tabs up top here to reflect the daily totals, eyes and nose are what you want to look at. The next tab is the vital signs. This shows everyone that's documented. You can scroll between it by going earlier and later, for example. Another way to look at it is if you move the cursor over to the left-hand side here and overlay the yellow box, you can click on the temperature and now see listed all of the temperatures that happened during this encounter. And down here on the right lower side, there's also a graphing functionality. So once you do that, you can always click back. You can also see the polls, so you can trend trace them going. You can graph again. The temperature, for example, when you graph it, it's important to look. This has a 3-day curve, a 1-day curve, a 10-day curve, and you can kind of see over time. So remember, if a patient's been here for a while, you might need to go beyond the 3 days, but there's other patients that doesn't affect. So going back, you can see all of the different pulse ox, which is kind of documented, and then it's pretty much it for the vital signs. For eyes and nose, it's important to remember that this is where the weight is. So this kid has only gotten 2 weeks, one in the ED and one on inhibition, so I've got 1 every week. You look back, the eyes and nose, you see a 24-hour value. You can cut this down to 8 hours, so it's going to spread things out. 4 hours, even down to the 1 hour, which can be helpful if you're really trying to track the fluid balance for a kid. And you can also click on these sections and see a list of what's charted. So this is the oral intake that's recorded. The caveat to that being that some of the nurses insert it in oral, some insert it in bottle. So you see bottle feeds, there's more data in that section. And the next tab is notes. When you look at the notes, if you look far down here to the left, there's notes, which is many less, and then this is assessment and notes view, which is my default. The notes view will just be when the nurses have written something that's free texted, and then the assessments will have a whole bunch more things like vascular access, a note about eyes and nose, a bunch of different things for that. You can also change up here by the providers, by the RT. Actually, that's just a respiratory thing by the nurses, nursing notes, and other tabs up here if you need to look at contact information or whatnot. So one of the more challenging sections to look at is this one, which is the medication tab. So we'll spend a little time on this. So the white medications here are ones that are active. The yellow ones are ones that have been discontinued. Sometimes you need to click on the all button to see previous medications that might have been administered in the ER. So scrolling up and down. So let's look at the active ones. When you look at the active ones, when you look at the right-hand column, this will always tell you whether and when a medication has been administered. So you can see that you got ampicillin at 12:48. If you click on this, you can also see a line of all of the past medication administrations. The important thing to note that this is per order. So if a kid is getting albuterol, for example, and there's a Q2 order, all of those administrations will be for the Q2, and then you have to look at the other order for Q3 to see how many times and when those were given. When you look at fluids, the nurses chart every so often, because when they have to change the bags is the time that they chart what's being given. Over here, the dose says 1,000 milliliters at 22 mLs per hour, but as you can see over here, what's being charted is 45 milliliters per hour, which you can confirm in the eyes and nose. Here's the Tylenol that this kid has been given, and the dose is written here also. Sometimes we're not sure about what fluid is actually being given. If you click on the left-hand column here, you can see that he's getting D5 normal saline in the detail. And then the history has when the order has been edited. Initially it was on 22 and 45. But more importantly, to know what the fluid is, D5 normal is in that tab, and you can go back to the MAR. When you look at the all tab, again, you see a bunch of these medications that don't have a dose administered. Most of the time that's a placeholder for whether this is pulled from the Pyxis in the ER. So you can ignore most of these ones that don't have a timestamp in it, or ignore all of them, because the things that you want to know are kind of over here. So you can see that Here, he isn't currently ordered for ibuprofen, but he did get a dose there in the ED, and then he got a dose of ceftriaxone this time in the ED, and then had also gotten ceftriaxone on the floor. Sometimes there are notes in the administration here. You can click on those little thought bubbles, and it says left thigh and right thigh to know where it was administered. Sometimes there are bubbles there that say medication not administered, but they don't actually cancel it. So that can be a little tricky. And then the discontinued tab should populate a lot of the all the discontinued ones, but sometimes they stay in the active one before they transition over. The next tab is order history. It's one of my favorites. This also will show in reverse chronological order everything that's been ordered since the kid arrived in the ER and who ordered it and when. And then sequentially it goes up to the top of the most recent orders up at the top. If you look down in the right-hand column, the status of the order can also be helpful. So you'll see the options are complete, resulted, canceled, in process, active. So active orders are active medications or active nursing orders or admission orders. In process tends to be labs that are waiting or that have been sent and are pending. So if you're looking for like a blood culture or urine culture, it tends to be in process before they've resulted. And then complete will be medications that have been completed, or an imaging typically says resulted when it's been complete. If there's an order for a lab that hasn't been sent, you'll actually see that it still says active here. So you can see that these were ordered, the CRP, BNP, and CC were ordered, but they weren't actually sent. They were reordered later, and those were actually completed. So if you're wondering if there was like a flu swab done in the ER, and you can see that it's ordered, but it still says active, that means it was never sent and never completed. Another example, a lot of times is we're waiting for EBV titers or GC chlamydia, and you'll see whether those are in process before they are actually resulted in the other columns. The next tab is the laboratory tab, and you'll see that this is from this visit. You can see that this child has a couple of different data points, and again, you can click on each individual parameter to see the history. Clicking through these different ones, not too much to say else about that. The microbiology tab, what you'll see here is you have a urine culture. This one has resulted and now has a grade that shows you the result and the sensitivities. When you first have urine culture that's in process, it will say in process here. And that can be a little bit tricky depending on what time the urine was actually plated. If it's plated in the evening, or if it's sent in the evening, sometimes or overnight, sometimes it's not plated till the morning, so you won't even have a tab there. Once it's plated is when you'll see an in process tab. And then typically 24 hours from that, or every morning at 9 a.m. is when 9 to 10 a.m. is when they read the urine cultures. And then after you get the culture, you'll have an organism, and it'll say in process, or it'll say gram-negative rods or gram-positive, depending on what the organism is. And then the next day you'll get, for example, this one says Enterococcus greater than 10,000, and then the next day you'll get the susceptibilities. So when you're looking at this and you can't remember how many colony-forming units there were, you click on this grid and it can tell you, again, it was greater than 100,000. The blood cultures are read continuously, so if it was to become positive, you should get a page. Sometimes the nurses are paged, so the charge nurses may have that information. If a wound culture comes back for Staph aureus, most of the time the same day they'll be able to say in that note whether it's MRSA or not, so you just have to keep an eye out for that. Another point I like to make is over here in the right-hand column, you can see that some of my tabs are blue and some of them are red. The red ones means that they're new results that I hadn't looked at yet. So the speciation for this urine culture, or the sensitivities, I'm sorry, for this urine culture hadn't come back yet. But now that I've reviewed it, once I click away and close the screen, it will show that that will turn blue again because I've already reviewed it. And these other ones will also turn blue. Blood bank is the next tab. We rarely use that. Sometimes in our sickle cell kids, we use that. Pathology, most of the time, you'll see a report when there's an appendicitis. When it's sent to the lab, the imaging tab, here again, it's just the current ones, but without changing to the view all, you can see the lifetime summary, and he doesn't have anything other than this visit. You can read the report, and from here you can pull up the image, which will pop into a separate web browser, and I'll get to that a little bit later. And then, as we discussed before, the other reports. In other reports, you'll find echoes and EKGs with the report signed here. And this is where your admission notes, progress notes go, and you see the ED documentation. Care trends. Most of the time you don't really look at this. When you're in the nursery, you'll look at integumentary to look for the transcutaneous bilirubin. Sometimes you'll look at respiratory notes here, but I don't use this stuff. Care activities, like a massive flow sheet of nursing assessments, most of which you can find in other places. A bunch of nursing documents here, so not too much really that I use in this one. Sometimes if you have a kid on a PCA, you'll look at pain score assessments here, or if you're looking at MAS babies in the nursery, they'll also have their pain scores there, but not too much else here. The history isn't super helpful. This is mostly documented by the nurses, and then I find the summary actually to be kind of important. So here in the providers tab, sometimes is updated with the primary care doctor. The context is important, even though it doesn't look like much. If you click on the yellow here, it actually opens to a new screen where you can see the contact information for the patient's family. And then the demographics also can come up. So let's see. Problem list. You can look at here, and I should have the active patient problems. And then discharge is another tab that goes through a lot in terms of what to do, but you can go through DC at home. Here you'll have the medications, the order to discharge, type in your instructions. You can also add some patient instruction forms down here that are like your ABSs in Epic. Discharge, and then orders. So Eric has a video on a bunch of orders. So some of my tips and tricks about orders is when you go into orders, make sure you're in orders, not sets when you start typing for something, or if you want a med, you type on within the medication category. And then sometimes you'll have medications that are favorited. When you look in the sets, there are your pediatric order sets over here, admission, DKA, IVIG, etc. You guys should also know that there's emergency pediatric ones. I like to use these. If I'm just ordering some labs, you can go into the fever neonatal. That just has like some great general labs. Or wheezing down here. This is where, for example, you can find like how to do just an hour continuous, or to do the 6-hour syringes. They're down here. So here's your free duo nabs, which you won't be able to bring inpatient. And then the Q6-hour nabs are the ones for the continuous albuterol syringes. You just have to remember that 30 milligrams Q6 is divided per hour, so it's only 5 milligrams per hour. most of our kids will be on at least 10 to 15 milligrams per hour, up to 20 milligrams per hour. Other things with the order, so one of the hardest things to order is EBV titers, because when you type EBV, you get these other two that you don't actually want. So think about another way. So it's Epstein virus, so then you can click on the actual panel here that you want. Another one that's sometimes hard is how to order a bolus or normal saline. So I usually use NS, so normal saline, and then I use the one that says 1,000 milliliter bag. You click on this. Over here, the R means route. You can actually edit this within the line. You choose IV. You can select it, and then you have your bolus. So in a kid that's less, you can pick between 30 and 60 minutes. A kid that's less than 25 kilos, over 30 minutes. It'll calculate it for you, and then you can just click select, and that will order it. You can also use this tab over here to edit and correct the details. Other things that I like to show you guys. So if you do ibuprofen, and you click on that, and you select it, you have a whole bunch of options here. If the kid is 16 kilos, for example, you can just click here, and you can actually click on the number itself to edit it directly in that without having to open the whole screen. If you still need Windows, you can click here and you can make it Q6 just by typing it, and then you can make it stat. You can make it PRN. You can make it schedule just by clicking within the line, and then you can select and be done with that. So again, to just reiterate, if it's something that you're having a hard time finding, think about the different ways it might be spelled, or start typing something else. So for example, if you want a BBG, you don't actually want a mixed venous PA swan line lab, you want a venous blood gas, and so that will be down here in the pulmonary function line. When you're ordering an ultrasound, I typically type US, and then when you're looking down here, for example, you get to like the if you're looking to do maybe an ultrasound of the pelvis because you're worried about torsion, there's different options here. Some of the category, sometimes the category over here will say women's health, so just make sure you're not picking ones that say women's health. For some reason, it's not popping up for me right now. Another medication that we use a lot is albuterol. So when you type in here albuterol, and you're going to order an MDI, you can click that there, and then you have your options here. Look at the very bottom one. It says relabel prescription for take home, and so that's the one that you can relabel for take home. And again, you can edit if you want it to be 4 puffs here, and then you can send that to the pharmacy. Same thing happens with Flovent. So if you do fluticasone, you can choose which dosing you want here. So we go with the 44, select, and the second one down is the relabel for home use. Getting down to the document tab here, this is where you'll see the notes. So this is where you enter a new one. It can be a pediatric progress note. But a lot of times people ask what to do if they've entered a note in error. So say I'm going to enter a pediatric progress note. So here's that. I'm going to click OK. I'm not actually going to save this one because I'm not going to document. But if you entered an error, on the far right, when you click here, you can choose Save as Canceled. And I'm not going to click it because it's in a patient's chart. But once you click Save, then it will be canceled. A little thing here will pop up that says reason for cancel, and you say entered an error, and then you can save it as a canceled note. So I'm just going to cancel that since I didn't want to write one. And then down here, there's a reconcile meds tab. You guys will end up using this for home medications, mostly in your discharge part, but you don't most of the time need to do the reconcile meds because the nurses typically do that. One other thing I want to show you guys is how to print. So when you want to print labs, for example, to send home with them, in the lab tab, you click print, and then you can click the report instead of screen, because the screen will make it without time. And you select OK. It's an administrative report, and then you can select the date and time, and then it will, when you click print, it should print out nicely as long as you encompass the date and times that you